This is On the Ballot, a Decision 2024 special, brought to you by Kelly Cawthorn.
Voting is underway right now as Mid-Michigan decides races for the White House, to the State House, to City Hall. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this On the Ballot election special. I'm Maureen Halliday.
And I'm Seth Wells. Over the next hour, you're going to meet some of the candidates hoping to earn your vote and some of the ballot issues facing voters on November 5th. And what Michigan decides could have national impacts. Our status as a swing state could help determine who wins the presidential race.
For the first time in a decade, Michigan will elect a new U.S. Senator to replace Debbie Stabenow, who is retiring after 24 years in the U.S. Senate. And we'll be watching some competitive congressional races here in Michigan that could affect the balance of power in Washington.
Democrats currently have control of the Michigan House of Representatives, something state Republicans hope to flip. And we speak with state and local election officials to make sure the election is safe and secure.
This has already been a busy election season that has seen surprises in the race for the White House.
What started as a rematch between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump was upended when President Biden dropped out of the race for a second term. After a disastrous debate performance, Joe Biden pulled out of the race. Polls showed voters were concerned over his age, as well as his handling of the economy, immigration, and foreign policy. That left Democrats scrambling to find a replacement for the top of the Democratic ticket. Biden's number 2, Vice President Kamala Harris, received her party's nomination at the Democratic National Convention in August in Chicago. If elected, she would become the first woman to ever be elected to the nation's top office. She chose Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her vice presidential running mate.
On the Republican ticket, former President Trump is hoping to return to the White House. The 78-year-old continues to face multiple lawsuits as he runs for a second term. In May, he was convicted of falsifying business records connected to a payoff to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Trump was also indicted and is awaiting possible trial for election interference and for taking classified documents. In July, days before the Republican National Convention, Trump was shot in the ear by an attempted assassin in Pennsylvania. Trump is joined on the ticket by Republican vice presidential candidate and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Also appearing on the ballot, independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He dropped out of the presidential race in August and threw his support behind Trump. Kennedy unsuccessfully sued to get his name removed from the ballot.
News 10's Taylor Gattoni spoke with our senior White House correspondent John Decker about the close race for the White House.
I'm here with John Decker, the White House correspondent, and thank you for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Taylor. Thanks a lot.
Of course. Well, first I want to start off with your part of the White House press corps. What does it take to get there?
Well, it takes a lot of hard work. It takes luck as well. I think anybody in the White House press corps will tell you that. And it also takes the ability to just keep up on things. So when you're a White House correspondent, you have to be aware of so many different things as far as domestic policy is concerned, foreign policy, politics, and then individual issues, things related to the economy and jobs and trade. So many different things that you have to keep up on. You have to be a jack of all trades every day that you're in the White House press briefing room.
Many different platforms we're seeing these days, an increase in technology, which therefore leads to an increase in attention when it comes to covering these different debates, these candidates, the election as a whole. What else can you speak on when it comes to the increased security, the safety measures that are taken? We're talking about the Secret Service needing to be stepped up because of violence or threats towards these candidates.
Yeah, I've seen that quite a bit over the years, but certainly over the course of the past 6 months. I was in Milwaukee for the Republican National Convention, Taylor, when that assassination attempt took place on former President Donald Trump. And obviously that changed everything as far as that convention was concerned, the increased amount of security. I see it at the White House. I see it out on the campaign trail. I even saw it just a few weeks ago, Taylor, at that first presidential debate in Philadelphia. The increased level of attention that the Secret Service is now paying to both of the candidates that they're assigned to protect every day for 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They've really increased the vigilance that's necessary to protect each of these candidates.
And what does that have to say about the safety from the candidates? You get to talk to Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, and you also get to see the different voters who are there as well.
I think that's one of the great things if you're covering a campaign is being able to talk to voters. We have a bubble, so to speak, Taylor, sometimes being in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of groupthink that takes place there. But when you get out to Lansing, Michigan, when you get out to other battleground states like Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and out west to Arizona and Nevada, you get a feel for what issues matter the most to voters. It's typically always jobs and the economy and inflation, but there are other issues as well that are compelling voters this election cycle, like border security, like reproductive rights. All of these issues will factor in to what voters ultimately decide in terms of casting their vote in November.
I'm glad you brought up Michigan being a battleground state, which we'll get to in just a second here. I watched you during the debate between Harris and Trump, and they did speak on many different issues and topics that they're vouching for here. What are the differences?
Well, I think the differences are the way that voters perceive them more than anything else. And what you see in polls is that this is really fascinating to me, that the vice president, who's a part of the current administration, is seen by voters, if you look at poll after poll, as the change agent. And yet she's a part of the current administration. Donald Trump is a former president, and to a certain extent, he is an incumbent, having served as president before. So that's one of the things that voters are factoring in. And then, of course, it's the way they answer the questions that are posed to them on these important issues, whether voters are getting the answers that they want, whether the presidential candidates are providing enough detail in those answers for those very few percentage of voters who would describe themselves as undecided voters.
John, I like how you said that and wrapped it up very nicely there. Speaking with the Michiganders, go vote and make your voices heard. Thank you, John, for joining us today.
Thank you, Taylor.
Making sure your vote counts. Coming up next, learn about the measures in place to ensure the Michigan vote tally is secure and accurate.
You're watching On the Ballot, a News 10 election special.
Welcome back to On the Ballot, a Decision 2024 special, brought to you by Kelly Cawthorn.
Welcome back. Michigan election officials say they are making sure that every legal vote cast will be counted.
News 10's Zachariah Wheaton spoke with Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson about what her office is doing to ensure election integrity.
With Michigan's role as a battleground state, all eyes are on us this election season. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson says the increased attention has also brought misinformation from both foreign and domestic groups.
The very people who are hearing a lot of this misinformation could also be easily misled when in reality, our election officials work every day to ensure our elections are secure.
To address concerns about election integrity, the state has launched a number of new voter information services that will allow voters to find information on elections, track their absentee ballot, and report any misinformation they see.
We have paper ballots in our elections. We conduct logic and accuracy tests prior to every election so that citizens can see just how accurate our machines are.
And despite the assurances, Republicans aren't sold. In fact, they're suing Secretary Benson, alleging that ballots were counted during the primary without the correct ballot number. And they say that ballots were verified improperly. In a statement, Michigan Republican Party Chair Pete Hoekstra said they want Michiganders to feel confident in their vote, no matter how they exercise that right. While Secretary Benson said the lawsuits are an attempt to spread disinformation.
Lawsuits are being used as a tool to create a narrative of distrust. And we'll continue to vigorously defend our processes and ensure the law is followed across the board.
And while litigation continues, local clerks feel confident their election will be safe and secure.
It's a busy time for my staff, for my office. We do a lot of things to make sure that the voters who are voting are eligible to vote and that it is, in fact, their own votes.
Reporting in Detroit, I'm Zachariah Wheaton, News 10.
You can find the new voter information services by going to the News 10 voter guide on WILX.com.
The balance of power in the United States Senate could hinge on the race here in Michigan to replace retiring Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow. The two candidates are well versed in Washington politics. The race features current Democratic Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin taking on former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers. Our David Andrews spoke with the two candidates hoping to represent Michigan in the U.S. Senate.
24 years representing the state of Michigan in Washington is coming to an end for Senator Debbie Stabenow. Running to replace her, current Democratic Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin and former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers.
I think that I have the right skill set. I can get busy on the first day.
For me, I come from a service background, and it's a continuation of my service.
48-year-old Elissa Slotkin has represented Michigan's 7th Congressional District for nearly 6 years. Her previous public service includes 3 tours in Iraq as a CIA analyst and as an acting assistant secretary in the Department of Defense. Before stepping away from politics in 2015, 61-year-old Republican Mike Rogers represented Mid-Michigan in Congress for 14 years. Rogers served in the U.S. Army for 4 years and worked as an FBI special agent. He says border security is a top priority.
That absolute open border for the last 4 years has been devastating.
Rogers says the influx of illegal citizens and drugs has been especially bad in southeast Michigan.
We've lost almost 3,000 of our citizens to fentanyl death coming across the southern border. And in southeast Michigan, we've had sexual assaults of minors by illegals.
No one's proud of what's going on at the southern border.
Slotkin says she's done more for border security than any other Michigan member of Congress and endorsed a bipartisan border tightening deal.
We had a deal that was on the table. Some of our most conservative Republican senators were the authors of that deal. Our border forces endorsed that deal, including the ones from Windsor and Sault Ste. Marie. And then they were told to stand down because they wanted to use that political issue in an election.
When it comes to pocketbook issues, Rogers says he'll be a champion for Michigan's middle class, which he says is struggling to make ends meet.
Cost of goods and services, groceries, insurance rates, your electric bill, your gasoline costs, all of that are making things just unattainable and unaffordable for families.
Slotkin says as a U.S. Senator, she will fight to keep in place what Rogers has voted to change.
He's voted to privatize Social Security, to cut Medicare, to raise the retirement age. He was 20 years an elected official, so he has a record on this.
On the issue of abortion rights.
Abortion's been settled. So abortion is legal in Michigan. It's a part of the Michigan Constitution. And I've said from the very beginning, I wouldn't do anything in Washington to change that.
After Roe was taken away, there has not been 1 month that the other side of the aisle hasn't stopped going after IVF, contraception, a woman's right to travel, the drugs that conduct abortions, any of it. So, and then there's constantly legislation for a national ban on abortion.
Political polar opposites, both determined to be Michigan's next U.S. Senator.
To me, what we need now more than ever is people who are looking to get into public service and to continue to serve because they want to serve their country. They don't want to serve themselves.
I think it's important we send somebody from Michigan to Washington, not Washington to Michigan.
Up next, how Michigan's vote this November is having a big impact on national politics.
That's when On the Ballot returns.
Welcome back to this News 10 election special. To vote in Michigan, you must be a U.S. citizen, 18 years old on Election Day, and a resident of your city or town for at least 30 days. Michigan voters are expected to play a big role in the presidential election.
As Amaya Kuznicki explains, our battleground state could decide which candidates will go to the White House and control Congress.
Michigan, a key swing state, is in the national spotlight, and everyone's asking the same question. Will the state lean red or blue in November?
All signs are pointing to a very close election this time.
Which is why our state has seen numerous visits from both Democratic and Republican candidates.
There's so much at stake in this election, and ultimately the question before us is what kind of country do we want to live in?
With your help, we are going to make America great again.
Matt Grossman, a political scientist at Michigan State University, says with the November election so close, candidates are trying to do everything they can to sway the Michigan vote.
And that's the best way to spend their time and money, is to try to convince a few more people to either turn out or to vote for their side.
Candidates are hoping to appeal to the two vital minority groups populating the state of Michigan: Black voters.
The national polls do see Democrats losing some ground among Black voters. A small amount of loss to Trump could make a difference in the outcome of the election.
And Arab American voters.
We have a very live set of conflicts in the Middle East, which could provoke interest and have provoked interest from that constituency.
Grossman says if the election comes down to one state, it very well could be Michigan. In Lansing, Maya Kuznicki, News 10.
Michigan represents 15 electoral college votes for the presidential election. It's the 10th most of any state in the country.
Two men are going head-to-head in the race for the 2nd Congressional District. That covers a portion of Eaton County, as well as Ionia, Clare, Berry, and several other counties. Republican Representative John Molinar is looking to keep his seat, but Democrat Michael Lynch is looking to take his spot. Republican John Molinar and Democratic challenger Michael Lynch are looking to represent Michigan's 2nd Congressional District in Washington, D.C. Lynch is a college instructor and a manager with the Saginaw Chippewa tribe of Michigan. Molinar has served in Congress for nearly 10 years.
It's an honor to serve, and I believe I've worked hard to represent the hardworking taxpayers, the farmers, the small businesses, people who care deeply about the future of this country, and I'm going to continue to be a good listener and someone who works on the problems that are affecting our district.
But Lynch says he can do a better job.
Right now, 4 of the 5 most impoverished counties in the state of Michigan are located in the 2nd Congressional District. We need to create opportunities, not only entrepreneurial opportunities, but we need to bring in organizations that will offer good-paying jobs.
Molinar and Lynch say they have different ideas on how to tackle inflation, but they plan to prioritize farmers.
If we can create more competition, that will not only increase what the farmers and ranchers are making, but it'll also decrease the prices at the grocery store.
The Labor Department regulations that are forcing our farmers to consider whether they can even make it in the future in agriculture. We need to have a free economy, get inflation down, less spending, and make sure that we can continue to thrive and lead the free world.
The two men also don't see eye to eye on the crisis at the border.
Immigrants are necessary, again, for us to grow our economy and to maintain frankly, our quality of life. Now, I do think that the Biden administration has been a little bit too lenient, trying to be too humane.
We need to secure our border, make sure that we keep crime down, and keep the drugs from coming across the southern border.
Voters in Ingham County will also be deciding on several local races. Among them, Democratic incumbents for county prosecutor, sheriff, and clerk are running for new terms. And Mason voters are being asked if they would like to allow up to 2 recreational marijuana retail businesses. Currently, city ordinances ban pot shops in Mason. Voters in Ingham County will also decide on a new housing and homeless millage. The $500,000 millage means an additional 50 cents for every $1,000 of taxable value. The money will go towards helping organizations like Eastside Community Action Center, which says assistance programs would be in jeopardy without the funding.
When we have more individuals who become homeowners, they have a invested interest in seeing that their neighborhoods are safe. They become part of the neighborhood and are concerned about what is going on in the neighborhood.
The millage is one of 2 initiatives on the ballot in Ingham County. The other is a hotel tax increase that supporters say will encourage tourism in the county.
If you've requested an absentee ballot, city clerks have already begun sending them out. Ingham County Clerk Barb Byram shares some important tips when it comes to filling out your ballot.
Some things to keep in mind for voters. Sharpies are the preferred ballot marking device, especially in Ingham County. Don't forget to flip over your ballot. Michigan, we have some of the longest ballots in the nation. Ingham County, they're going to be 18 inches long, but there is a back. Flip it over. See if there's anything else left to vote on. Make sure you are looking. Fill in those ovals.
Byram says it's not too late to request an absentee ballot. All absentee ballots need to be returned no later than 8 p.m. on Election Day.
Well, new technology is making it harder for voters to determine what's real and what's not.
The fight against election misinformation next on this News 10 Decision 2024 special.
Welcome back to On the Ballot, a Decision 2024 special, brought to you by Kelly Cawthorn.
As millions of Michigan voters begin to cast their ballots, experts say artificial intelligence-generated content is spreading misinformation about the 2024 election.
Experts warn people should be on the lookout for what's real and what's fake so it doesn't influence their vote. News 10's Jordan Burrell breaks it down for us.
It's already happening. It's not some dystopian scenario. We're already living in this.
A survey by Elon University found that 69% of its participants are not confident that most voters can detect fake photos, audio, or video. Anjana Susarla, Michigan State University professor of responsible AI, says artificial intelligence is becoming more common and it's being used to push the spread of misinformation, especially when it comes to the election.
If we stop trusting content, then we stop trusting everything. We just don't know how to tell the difference between what's real and what's fake.
Well-known celebrities and even politicians have shared AI-created content that have spread false information. Notably, former President Donald Trump shared an AI-generated endorsement from Taylor Swift, which we now know is false, Swift endorsing Kamala Harris weeks later. Elon Musk, the owner of social media platform X, shared an image of Vice President Kamala Harris dressed as a communist, claiming that she vows to be a communist dictator.
And I've never seen anything like what we're seeing this year.
And for the people that are consuming the social media in real time, like Jeff Patton, he says staying informed might be the only way to not fall victim.
It's very scary. I've read some books on AI and the potential is enormous. And I think folks have to learn to be skeptical without being cynical.
AI experts and people like Patton alike pushing to have more safeguards in place.
It doesn't matter which political party or, this is a consensus that we should all adopt maybe some sort of standards.
I think we have to be very careful with the management and regulation of AI.
Since the launch of ChatGPT 2 years ago, there have been bills introduced in Congress to regulate the use of AI, but none of those bills have passed.
Turning now to Michigan's 5th Congressional District. The area covers Hillsdale and Jackson counties. Voters this November will decide if the incumbent, Republican Congressman Tim Walberg, will remain in his position or if he will be replaced by Democrat Libby Urban. I was able to hear from both candidates on where they stand on some of the hot-button issues. Michigan's 5th Congressional District race comes down to incumbent Republican Tim Walberg and his challenger, Democrat Libby Urban. Walberg is currently serving his 8th term in the U.S. House. Before his time in Congress, Walberg served in the Michigan House of Representatives from 1983 to 1999. And before his time in politics, was a pastor in both Michigan and Indiana. He now lives in Tipton.
I do have a record, 16 years in the U.S. House. You have a record. And you'd better be proud of at least most of it, or you're in trouble.
Walberg's opponent this November, Libby Urban, is a steel worker who has lived in southern Michigan for 28 years. Urban is involved as the vice president of their local United Steelworkers Union.
They train their memberships to be leaders. And I went through a lot of that training, and not only was I a leader in my union, but now I'm taking it out into the community.
When it comes to the hot-button issues, both candidates believe tackling inflation should be a major focus going forward.
We need to make sure we don't have monopolies going on in the food industry, which can cause, extreme problems. So I think once we get some of that under control and put some pricing controls around price gouging, I think we'll start to see those prices come down.
Too much government money has been put in the system for the past 4 or 5 years. Going from COVID on to the very present, we have to stop that.
Michigan has always been a leader in the auto industry, but the future of vehicles is up for debate, and the two candidates have differing opinions on electric vehicles.
We're not opposed to EVs, we're opposed to mandating. Let the consumers come along. And I think people understand what they need, what they want best.
Climate change is a serious concern and issue that's affecting, not just the United States, but the whole world. And I think the sooner we can get to those cleaner vehicles, the better off we'll be.
On the southern border, each candidate believes there is work to be done.
We need a common sense in immigration policy, and we had one that was squashed. But we really need a policy because we have farmers in Michigan that use these immigrants to pick their produce. And if we can't get those people in here, we're going to have problems with our food, which in turn would cause prices to go up.
Well, I can simply say this, and I don't want to sound too political, but I don't know how to say it any other way. Put the same policies that were in place during the Trump administration.
And abortion was a hot-button issue in the last election. While Urban believes it is yet again for Michiganders, Wahlberg does not.
I'm pro-life, but that's not an issue in Michigan anymore. The people passed an abortion constitutional amendment that is worse than Roe v. Wade.
I believe it is still a hot-button issue. More states are trying to get it on the ballot so they can get it passed. But I think we need one common-sense law across the entire country.
Jackson County voters will decide the fate of several funding proposals this November. Among the proposals, Jackson College is asking voters to approve a millage to raise money for job training, job placement, and professional trades programs. In Blackman Township, voters will decide whether to increase funding for its public safety department, and road maintenance is on the ballot for Napoleon Township voters. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office is hoping the public safety millage gets passed. It would look to raise $1.5 million annually for the next 10 years to fund the county jail. Jackson County Sheriff Gary Schutte says if the millage doesn't pass, it could impact public safety.
We are 6 deputies low on both the Corrections Division and in the Law Enforcement Services Division.
Schutte says if the measure doesn't pass, cuts would be made to staffing and road patrols. The Sheriff's Office also provides public safety services to rural areas, which could be impacted if voters turn down the additional funding.
In-person early voting will be underway in just a few weeks. Jackson County Clerk Sierra Sowley said the early voting process is quick and easy.
I had this one couple who actually had never had the opportunity to vote in person together before because their jobs took them away on election day every year. And so that was the first time that they were able to vote together, and so that was monumental in their relationship.
There is still time to register to vote. You can register online until October 21st and in person until Election Day, November 5th.
State House races will be decided next month.
Coming up, how the vote could determine control of power at the state capitol in Lansing.
Welcome back. 2 years ago, Democrats took control of the state Senate, the House of Representatives, and the governor's office for the first time in 40 years.
Republicans have been looking to break up that trifecta ever since. And with a thin majority in the House of Representatives, Republicans only need to flip 2 seats to take control. Zach Gorchow of the Gongwer News Service says that there are 10 seats statewide out of the 110 districts that are super competitive. Gorchow says that if Republicans take control of the House of Representatives, they will bring a halt to Democrats being able to do whatever they want to do for policies and budgets.
You can't go without a budget, so there will have to be some negotiations and give and take to resolve that. But as far as the other kind of left of center policies that Governor Whitmer has been signing into law coming out of the legislature, that's not going to happen.
Gorchow says that if Republicans do take over the state house, we could expect to see Democrats to push a lot through in the lame duck session, including legislation on firearms, the environment, and paid family leave.
2 men who have served in the state Senate are vying to represent Michigan's 7th congressional district. Democratic Senator Curtis Hertel and former Republican Senator Tom Barrett are both husbands and fathers to 4 children. News 10's Ann Emmerich tells us where they stand on some of the issues facing local voters.
A Democratic senator with a background in government, a former Republican senator who spent years in the Army, 2 candidates with specific ideas on how they'd represent mid-Michigan on Capitol Hill. Tom Barrett says he wants to help families.
The soaring cost of living, with inflation, with housing costs, energy costs, and everything all the way down the line is really plaguing family budgets more now than probably ever before in recent history.
Senator Hertel says his experience solving problems at the state capitol will allow him to hit the ground running.
I've worked across the aisle to try to solve problems. I helped pass the largest middle-class tax cut in state history. We ended the retirement tax. we protected reproductive rights.
One of the top priorities Hertel says he'll take to Washington.
If we don't protect that in federal law, at any point Congress could try to undo that and undo the progress we've made here in Michigan.
Barrett's top priority is to lower the cost of living. He says the U.S. can do that by capitalizing on its natural gas supply and exporting it.
That will bring down costs for everything in the economy, because so much of what we consume on a daily basis is either energy intensive to produce it, or it takes energy to get it to the market where we ultimately go and buy it, groceries, for example, and other things like that.
When it comes to immigration, the candidates agree the U.S. needs to secure its southern border.
So before we start saying we're going to legalize everybody who's come here illegally, broken the laws of the United States, violated the rules and regulations that we have, I think we ought to put Americans back to work, certainly first and foremost.
We need more hard security, more soft security. We need to be scanning for fentanyl. We also need to fix our asylum system so that people can get adjudicated quickly through that system.
When it comes to gun violence in schools, Barrett wants to spend federal money to embed a school resource officer in every school.
They can build relationships with the students, mentor them along the way, help know about what is taking place in a school so that they can identify some of the kids that may be having problems or may show traits that are problematic that may need a little bit more attention.
Senator Hertel says Congress should follow Michigan's lead and enact reasonable gun laws.
I believe in the Second Amendment. You have a right to protect yourself, but it's not a death pact. If we know that someone's dangerous, if we know that there's a gun in the home, and people aren't taking the proper steps to actually make sure that it doesn't fall into the hands of the wrong person, there should be consequences.
Both candidates promised to protect Social Security and keep the retirement age at 67, but their ideas on how to do that differ. Barrett says government spending. Senator Hertel wants millionaires to pay more.
Some area school districts are asking voters to approve funding proposals in Eaton County. Grand Ledge Schools has two proposals on the ballot. The first is a millage to pay for operating funds. The second measure is a sinking fund millage to pay for school improvements. Eaton County voters will also decide whether Sheriff Tom Reich will serve another 4-year term. A proposed $12 million millage hangs in the balance. If Eaton County voters reject the separate tax limitation proposal in November, county services could see major cuts, affecting everything from court to law enforcement. Eaton County Road Patrol is already dealing with staffing shortages. Sheriff Tom Reich says the department is down 15 deputies and says that number could increase if the proposal fails.
Right now I don't have deputies on patrol from midnight to 6 a.m. We won't be able to take calls. Any crimes that are committed, Michigan State Police will have to take the calls, and right now they only got 2 or 3 cars per shift to deal with calls here in Eaton County.
Reich says if the proposal fails, Eaton County also won't have extra money available to pay for help from other departments like Delta Township.
And with the election just a few weeks away, a lot of voters are opting to cast their ballots sooner rather than later. Eaton County Clerk Diane Bosworth says people taking advantage of absentee and early voting may help reduce lines and make voting more accessible for people opting to vote in person on Election Day.
What I expect is that early voting is going to allow us a more smooth election day, because with more people voting early, either by absentee ballot, by mail, or by coming in to one of these early voting sites, it will help the lines and the smooth running flow on Election Day.
Bosworth says she's expecting an even larger early voter turnout in Eaton County this November.
Well, we've all seen them. Political attack ads seem to be all over the airwaves these days.
Coming up, why experts say so many candidates choose to go negative in the search for votes.
As both the Democratic and Republican presidential nominees continue to make stops across the country fighting for votes, the impact of what they say has a large influence on American people.
Political rhetoric is nothing new, but in recent years, it has intensified. Lansing Community College political scientist Michael Giles says heated political rhetoric is when a candidate suggests that their opponent is not only wrong and undeserving of the job, but that they're bad or evil, tainting not only the candidates, but the people who vote for them. But as to why we see so much of it, Giles says there's 2 reasons.
Negative messaging is much more memorable than positive messaging. Secondly, I think that American elections are apocalyptic. the stakes do feel incredibly high. And so what that means then is that we all kind of get a tummy ache over it. We get that sick feeling in our stomachs because we know the stakes are high. And that is just kind of a natural human reaction that kind of undergirds that heated rhetoric.
Giles adds, just because we're seeing a lot of heated political rhetoric, it's rare that voters will change their minds come November.
Political parties are working hard to make sure their supporters get out to the polls. Caroline Levitt is the national press secretary for President Trump's campaign. She says their goal is to educate as many voters as they can.
Through paid advertising, through door knocking, phone calls, and our get out the vote efforts with our field teams on the ground. And we're focused on targeting those voters and educating them on early voting and their respective states and counties as well.
Lavora Barnes is the chairwoman of the Michigan Democratic Party. She says they have people out in force trying to educate people about the election.
We're knocking on people's doors. We're sending text messages. We've got thousands of volunteers all over the state who are helping us do outreach into their neighborhoods and their communities to remind people of the importance of this election.
Absentee voting is already underway, and early in-person voting is just weeks ahead of the election on November 5th. It is the highest court in the state of Michigan. Supreme Court justices make decisions that affect legal cases across the state for years to come.
And there are 4 people hoping to convince voters they're right for the job. News 10's Riley Connell tells us who's on the ticket this November in the race for Michigan Supreme Court.
Only 2 open seats and 4 candidates, each seeking to uphold the state constitution as a Michigan Supreme Court justice. Justice Kyra Harris Bolden is trying to hold on to her seat to keep making an impact.
I sit in the head of 2 task forces, the treatment court and child welfare. And in being a part of those task forces and doing the work, making the decisions, there's just so much more work to do. And so I'm running to retain my seat so I can continue to make good decisions on behalf of Michiganders.
A former attorney and acting state representative, Andrew Fink says care and consideration for the court process are his reasons for running.
Understanding how all of that works is important because that's what really those decisions and how they impact the thousands and thousands of cases that are brought every year, not just the few dozen cases that the Supreme Court decides every year, but the way in which those decisions, including those administrative decisions, affect the people who are in the courts on a day-to-day basis. That's really an important part of what I'm trying to bring.
Patrick William O'Grady says he knows what it's like to make tough decisions, and his experience as a circuit court judge make him most effective on the bench.
Understanding all the cases that come into a courthouse basically daily, if not hourly sometimes, and having the opportunity to serve all those cases and all the different types of cases that comes through, have that variety of experience, I think really allows you to understand what each community is going through, and also gives you the incredible amount of experience in all of those case law areas.
Kimberly Ann Thomas says she wants a seat on the court to make sure people in Michigan receive the quality of justice they deserve.
And so the justice that they see, the court systems that they see, are those local court systems. And the Michigan Supreme Court, works with stakeholders across the state to try to improve transparency of our local court, the accessibility of our local court to people that are in that system, their ability to use and understand our local court systems. And so that's incredibly important work.
The state Supreme Court is nonpartisan, meaning these candidates aren't running on policy, but rather core values.
So the values that I bring are dignity and respect, and being open to arguments, open to different thought processes.
My experience in the Marine Corps, of course, taught me the Marine Corps core values, which are honor, courage, and commitment.
I think that there needs to be a high level of grace and wisdom to everybody that comes into the courtroom.
I was privileged to be an expert for the American Bar Association's Rule of Law Initiative in several other countries, and to work with and see how important integrity is for court systems around the world.
With these values in mind, candidates are hoping voters will connect with their mission the most in November and give them a chance to serve the state on its highest court.
Voters in some Clinton County communities will find funding proposals on the November 5th ballot. Funding for road repairs is being decided in Victor and Westphalia townships. A Parks and Recreation and Fire Services millage are also being decided in Westphalia Township next month. Voters in St. John's are being asked to override the Headley Amendment, which limits the amount of property tax local governments can ask for. All taxable property in St. John's currently has a millage rate of 9.78 mils. This override would increase that rate to 10 mils, resulting in $60,000 for the city of St. John's.
And that $60,000 is the equivalent of, the entire recreational programming budget, or one starting salary of a police officer.
If the millage is passed next month, it would mean an increase in property taxes for those who own homes or land in St. John's. It would also mean more funding for the police and fire departments and parks and recreation activities for the city.
To process all those votes and to staff all those precincts takes an army of poll workers. Lansing City Clerk Chris Swope says while they're in good shape for election workers, he urges people to get involved.
There are lots of communities that I know that are still looking for folks. And sometimes, one of the challenges we have is we have to have people apply by political party, and we need to get as much of a balance between Democrats and Republicans as we can. So, Lansing, we always have more Democrats, so we can always use a few more Republicans, and there are other communities that have the opposite.
If you are interested in becoming a poll worker, you can reach out to your local clerk's office for more information. Before you cast your ballot, make sure you know what you're voting on.
Go to WILX.com and click on the Decision 2024 tab to find our voting guide. But the most important thing is to make your voice heard.
On behalf of the entire News 10 team, thank you for watching this Decision 2024 election special. I'm Seth Wells.
And I'm Maureen Halliday. Have a good night.